Number 2, not slanderers. Titus 2:3, be not slanderers. Before we go, I want to talk about not slanderers and not in excess to anything in life. Those are the next 2 points that he's given. Paul turns the spotlight after this reverent behavior, this priestess-like behavior of these women. He turns, secondly, the spotlight on the hardest member of the body to control. Remember, according to James, what's the hardest part of our body to control? The most agile and versatile part, our tongue. James says that we need to beware of our tongue. Well, Paul, specifically in his epistles, 2 times tells women to be careful not to slander. That's very interesting. Tells women to be careful not to slander. Before you get upset about that, let me qualify it. Paul targets a woman's habit of their communication. He says your communication is a spiritual qualifier or disqualifier. The way you talk, the way you convey communication either qualifies or disqualifies you. Though it's a universal problem we all face, James says we all have trouble controlling our tongues. Paul zeroes in, for some reason, the Spirit of God guided him in to twice say to women, this is a qualifier that you need to watch out for. Now, wait till you see how many times he says it to men, but we're only talking about the women right now, okay? So people get all nervous and they start flipping through their Bible to see if he says that about men. That's just our human nature. Don't worry. The men really get it, okay? But look back at 1 Timothy 3:11, because this is a parallel passage. The godly women, 1 Timothy 3 and verse 11. He says to them, in the same way, Paul specifically says to women who want to serve Christ's church, guard those tongues. 1 Timothy 3:11. In the same way, their wives, the word is women, and there's great, you can go either way with this, and some of the greatest Bible teachers in the world differ over this. It's very interesting. Right in the middle of talking about elders, men, and then deacons, men, all of a sudden in verse 11 it says, likewise, the there in the New King James is in italics, and so it's implied, it's not in the text. And then it says, wives, and actually it's just the word for women. So it says, likewise, women. Now, to show you how some churches interpret this, for 5 years, I was paid to be a full-time shepherd at a large church, over 300 deaconesses. How do you like that? 300 women deacons in a church. The church was called Grace Community Church, John MacArthur's church. And I was the shepherding pastor over the 300 men deacons and the 300 women deacons. And so John takes verse 11 to be talking to female deacons. And you say, whoa. Well, that's a very valid interpretation of this text. And it's a very, of course, you know that there's this hanging the women out there, and so he takes it to be women servants of the church, women deacons. But however you take it, and either way is fine, whether it's the wives of the spiritual leaders or whether it's these deaconesses or whatever it is, what Paul is saying to them is, in the same way, women, be women worthy of respect. That's that reverent behavior, not malicious talkers. You notice what he said? He says, after you get that reverent attitude, be so careful about what you say. Guard your tongue. Don't be a malicious talker. Now go back to Titus chapter 2, because I want to explain the word in Titus 2. Whereas men tend to be rough or violent in their actions, women have a tendency to be rough or violent in their words. Older women who find themselves with time on their hands can be tempted to allow their conversations to lead to gossip, criticism, and slander. That's what he was talking about. If you read the 1 Timothy passages, he says, watch out, they are idle and they go from house to house talking. And they get a little bit here and a little bit there and they share it here. And pretty soon they are talking in a way that's malicious, that is not beneficial to the church. Now, can you imagine how much greater temptation is today, where you don't even have to walk from house to house, where you can just be on the phone constantly and hear a little bit here and share a little bit and just constantly go back and forth and piece things together and say, have you heard about this? Did you know this? Did you know this? And that was brewing in the first century. James chapter 3 tells us something interesting about our tongues. James says that your tongue and my tongue can show how much of our body is under control. He says if our tongue is not under control, our whole body's out of control. If we have malicious talk, then there's some part of our life that is not under the lordship of Jesus Christ. We're not yielded to Him. In fact, for just a second, go all the way to the right to James 3. I want to just show you the intensity of his speaking to that first century church in Jerusalem as the pastor, and then radiating out to all those early believers that he wrote to, scattered around after the persecutions. James chapter 3, my brethren, believers, he says, let not many of you become teachers, James 3:1, knowing that we all shall receive a stricter judgment. So a teacher is under a higher level of scrutiny. For we all stumble in many things, and if anyone does not stumble in word, he is perfect, a perfect man, and able also to bridle the whole body. And then he starts talking about how little an object can steer an animal like a horse, and then he talks about ships. And then he says in verse 5, the tongue is a little member that boasts great things. And look how big a forest a little fire can kindle. And then he says it, verse 6, and the tongue is a fire, a world of iniquity. The tongue is so set among our members that it defiles the whole body and sets on fire the course of nature, and it is set on fire. By what? By hell. Back to Titus 2. Let me show you something fascinating. And if you've never seen this before, it's just amazing. Note the source of all wickedness, especially of an uncontrolled tongue, James said, is hell. He says when someone with their mouth causes fires, when they cause problems, when they stir things up, like in Proverbs, a talebearer that remember when there's no wood, the fire goes out, so there's no strife when the talebearers cease. When the person that's going around and inciting things and saying, did you know this? Are you sure about that? Have you? And it doesn't always have to be an overt lie. It can just be a well-placed question like, have you ever thought, wonder why this? And it's just little words that set fires in people's minds. But James says, note that the source of all wickedness, especially of an uncontrolled tongue, is hell. And it's Satan who is at the root of all gossip, all harmful talk, and all slander. If you're damaging the reputation and ministry of others, James says you're a tool of the devil. And if you keep reading the James passage, he talks about either motivation comes from beneath, through selfish ambition and confusion, or it comes from above, where it's pure and peaceable and gentle. You can tell what is motivating someone's words. If their words lead to confusion and strife, if they stir people up and there's confusion and strife, the motivation is from the devil. If their words are pure and peaceable and gentle and full of mercy and good fruits and without partiality and without hypocrisy, they came from the Lord.